Hello, welcome to this new session of the 9th conference on the regulation of infrastructure. We are working this year on sector coupling, the convergence of the different network industries, and the next paper to be discussed has been written by Professor Günter Knieps. The title is Sector Coupling Through the Lens of 5G Networks. And of course, technology, and in particular 5G, is one of the elements pushing for this sector coupling. So this sure will be a very interesting session. So Professor Knieps, you can go ahead, please.
Title of my paper and also of my presentation is Sector Coupling Through the Lens of 5G Networks. I start with the perspective of the data value chains from the perspective of 5G-based big data virtual networks. 5G is multi-purpose driven for a large and open set of IoT applications with heterogeneous information and communication technologies, requirements entailing heterogeneous quality of service, requirements of bandwidth capacities, heterogeneous sensor networks, heterogeneous big data processing capacities, and heterogeneous security requirements. To fulfill the requirements of Internet of Things IoT applications, for example, network vehicle applications, shared mobility service, microgrid, it is important that the virtual network providers have the entrepreneurial decision competencies to design the big data value chains according to the requirements of the Internet of Things applications. An important dimension of these virtual networks is the communication network, and in particular the spectrum allocation for future 5G-based virtual networks. That is the first part of my paper, where I go into the role of spectrum allocation for the future 5G-based virtual networks. And within 5G networks, there is an increasing trend from special purpose frequency allocations towards application blind, unbundled, flexible allocation. Whereas historically, radio frequencies were strongly coupled to specific types of services. Then we have the spectrum allocation. And this spectrum allocation is an important case not for coupling, but for decoupling, in the sense that we have historically radio frequencies were strongly coupled to specific types of services. For example, broadband, radio senders, voice communications. The transition towards all IP-based next generation networks increases the trend towards unbundled, flexible provision of frequencies. That means the frequency spectrum can then use for different purposes depending on the demand and supply conditions. And taking the allocation of the radio spectrum committees as given, one can nevertheless consider the degrees of freedom of the actors involved regarding reallocation. The focus is on sharing solutions from separate subbands with different priorities for parties involved towards market-driven, shared-based on opportunity cost of utilization of spectrum. Technical progress regarding spectrum usage is changing opportunity costs for spectrum allocation mechanisms, creating innovative forms of sharing, for example, dynamic spectrum sharing, spectrum pooling. The role of innovational complementarities should not be neglected. Innovations of the complementary dimensions should be taken into account. For example, big data and complementary investments into physical network infrastructures with particular focus on path dependency. So there is one chapter in this paper focusing on the future role of spectrum allocation from the perspective of heterogeneous classes of applications. Now I come to the role of data-driven sector coupling, and I decided for my paper to focus on smart sustainable cities, because smart sustainable cities are not only considered as data hubs, collecting large volumes of data, offering large scope for data-driven innovations. So cities as data hubs, they are also providing, within a nutshell, a large variety of sector coupling opportunities due to the variety of smart network infrastructures and services involved. So in a nutshell, these smart sustainable cities are particularly, that is my learning from writing this paper, is particularly relevant for sector coupling issues. And different forms of sector coupling within smart sustainable cities may be differentiated, building innovative sustainable value chains. Firstly, sector coupling between different sectors. Synergies of urban system integration can be exploited, for example, in the case of transport, energy, waste systems, coupling biogas produced in recycled wastewater plants with feeding the buses and taxis. Secondly, sector coupling shaping new intermodal markets from intramodal transportation markets towards mobility as a service markets and shared mobility projects. Thirdly, coupling generation with consumption within microgrids operator platforms. Fourthly, coupling renewable energy with electricity vehicle mobility. So there is, one can say, there is a lot of potential for sector coupling in this smart sustainable city context. And that is, of course, I elaborated more in the paper, for example, sections on shared mobility and so on. But the focus is that we have not only one form of sector coupling, but we have different forms of sector coupling, and with particular relevance, data-driven sector coupling in smart sustainable cities. From the perspective of smart sustainable cities, which are considered as data hubs, data-driven sector coupling is particularly important. Examples for cross-functional applications of this Zigbee IP sensor networks within smart sustainable cities are infrastructure maintenance, garbage management, and street parking. Electronic devices endowed with smart metering facilities enable real-time digital collection of consumption data of network services within urban infrastructures with remote accessibility of consumption data of electricity, heat, gas and water consumption, enabling not only meter reading, but also billing, leak detection, and peak load pricing. Furthermore, mobility as a service platforms can evolve for intermodal physical transportation services, enabling seamless app-based mobility as a service combining the advantages of sector coupling with different complementary rail and road-based transportation. Furthermore, ICT and digitalization of urban flows is gaining increasing importance. Increasing the opportunity to monitor and manage urban infrastructure in real time. Smart sustainable cities also make benefit from cross-sector data sharing, enabling by Zigbee IP sensor networks and smart metering. Examples can be drawn from electricity, water and waste systems, transport services, and application of real-time peak load demand and supply conditions. And now, final slide. There is this concept of digital twins. The digital twins context is entailing what is a digital twin? Digital twins entail virtual replicas of urban infrastructure with real-time information fed with sensors and other data sources. 5G-driven artificial intelligence, augmented and virtual reality technologies made it possible to create virtual replicas of objects, processes, places from the physical world consisting of a software representation of the real assets. So that there is a growing movement in cities having deployed digital twins. For example, Newcastle, Rotterdam, Boston, New York, Singapore, Stockholm, Helsinki, and Jaipur. The new capital city of Amaravati, India, uses digital twins for the design of a greenfield smart city. New city from the bottom up, greenfield. And there's a strongly growing number of digital twins expected within the next decade. So that is the concept of the new concept of digital twins. This, of course, strongly increases the role of 5G because RE, also this these augmented and virtual reality technologies, strongly need big data and also need real-time, very tactile, very low latency requirements. And also, data value chains are pivotal in developing Internet of Things applications in smart, sustainable cities. The entrepreneurial governance problems within IoT requires physical and complementary virtual networks. Both together enable the adaptive real-time and location-differentiated network configurations. And also, digital twin technologies may become very supportive within city planning and city operation activities. Virtual replicas cannot replace the entrepreneurial governance problem solutions to organize the market-driven activities of the different actors involved, such as platform operators, virtual network providers, or all IP broadband capacity providers. So I stop here so that we have enough time for discussions and comments.
Thank you very much. The paper will be discussed by Professor Parku, FSR, Florence School of Regulation, Telecoms chapter. So please, Professor Parku.
Well, this paper has two streams. One stream is, seems to me, the fact that it underlines how certain pieces are falling together in this very moment. The arrival of 5G, and the paper rightly says is a general purpose technology, and we'll discuss this also later, is very, very important because it will allow to have to fully exploit big data in a decentralized way and in a mobility situation. When you say that the Internet of Things will become reality because of 5G, I agree. I think that this is really the change we are going to see very soon. And in fact, in the first part of the paper, you insist on the fact that we should think to 5G and to 5G assignments of spectrum as in a more flexible way than in the past, because 5G is going to affect many sectors and many activities different than when before we were assigning frequencies to do mobile telecommunication or mobile data. 5G is a new beast and can do many things, so that we need more flexibility. And this flexibility can be given should be reached in different ways, because cannot be totally given by assignment that have this international dimension, ITU dimension that is more general. Then the flexibility should come later somehow, and the ability to have virtual networks to really exploit what we really need. Sometimes we need general things, sometimes we will need very specific things. Sometimes we will need to organize a stadium, a soccer stadium with 5G. Sometimes we'll need to organize in a certain way a company, a firm. Sometimes we'll need to organize a street and things that can be very different. 5G is an occasion for very different requests. And then your paper moves to the using this line of reasoning to cities. And that's the real discussion. And the discussion is about the model of cities. One thing that you underline is this idea that now is moving of twin cities. Because of technology, the data information, the sensor, all the information we have is possible to begin to reply cities. So to have a sort of natural experiment in which we can experiment before the changes, the reforms, the innovation, the improvements. But as you underline, this is an enhancement that is technological. The question is if then there will be on the ground the governance capability to translate this technological enhancement in reality, in coordination. And I think that this will be probably, even if it's paradoxical, will be more difficult than the technology, because it's very difficult to coordinate actors and so on. And this, we had a paper a few years ago with Paola Gori and Maria Luisa Stasi about smart cities, in which we were somehow discussing definition and so on. But the true point we were trying to begin to dig on, it was really the point of who is the leading actor. Clearly, if you have a twin city, the leading actor is who can replicate the city, maybe. But then this leading actor has to translate in the reality. And that's not easy, as you were mentioned. Then you discuss some example of sector coupling. I think that the most clear at the moment are electricity and transport, because they are the closest in a sense, even if obviously communication is behind everything, because in the end is a communication technology, 5G, and that's what is enabling everything. But clearly there is an important occasion for sector coupling. You make some example. I think that an underexploited idea is also at the moment, but its time is coming, the relation between producer and consumers. I think with sharing economy, with the dynamics that we are seeing, certain differences will be less clear than in the past. Both we know that this happens already in electricity in certain situations, but it's happening in many other situations. And so is really another element of the discussion about cities that will come in the near future. So I think that is an interesting paper opening several avenues of reflection, and I think that we can have a further discussion. And clearly we have to be able in the future to combine technology and governance. I think this will be particularly for cities the real challenge.
We have no questions from the audience, but I might raise two very short questions, pretty much based on what Professor Parku presented. One, do you see a role for private 5G networks managed by infrastructure managers? So railways and ports, airports. And the second question is, who do you think will be the coordinator? Will it be the existing players, the infrastructure managers? Do you think it will be the city itself for smart cities? Do you think it will be new players like digital platforms coming from Silicon Valley? I mean, building on this, would you think would be the entity really leading the convergence?
First of all, I would like to thank Professor Parku for the very helpful and interesting comments. And I agree that the relation between technology and governance is a very important research area for the future. And coming to the two questions, I would say this 5G technology is a very, very heterogeneous technology. And it is also from the perspective of on the level who is organizing these 5G networks. If you put it in the perspective of virtual networks, you have a lot of applications where there is a local footprint, where you need in a local area, for example, network vehicles. You have in a network vehicle, you have these local cells which you are going to to have with specific requirements. So that I would say that that there is I expect that there is a variety of players which can come in these markets, and not that is not a monolithic infrastructure. So I expect that there will be a variety. For example, look at smart railroads. In the smart railroad context, we need longer distance 5G organized networks. And we also need different, let's say, different area of spectrum as compared to the tactile local requirements of network vehicles. So we have a heterogeneous environments. And I think that there is a big role for private initiatives. We in Germany are discussing where are these areas where we have not a viable network space, but that is not large parts. The private companies will play an important role, I think. And coming to the second question, that was, I forgot a little bit. The second question was on
private 5G.
Private 5G, and so I expect that private initiatives will come and are also on the way, and that this network evolution will have good potentials for private initiatives. And yeah, and the question, who is organizing the city? That was the other question. Who is organizing the smart sustainable city? I expect that for example, when one look at from the perspective of the digital twins, I would expect that there is not the role of one centralized city planner and one centralized I cannot see that one city planner is doing all the job for all the different areas and infrastructure possibilities. I think that there will be, let's say, silos, niches. There will be a different, for example, when we look at the support of this vertical, these replicas, this digital twins, and I would say the digital twins can help in very specialized questions. For example, how do we organize streets? How do we organize a bus system? How do we organize a electricity system in an area? But it can, of course, also consider areas like public safety. In the public safety, of course, it should be in one hand, and that should be organized by one city major should organize the safety in the city. But when you look at the evolution of different forms of shared mobility activities, then I would think that there are many actors can evolve, which are locally regional, doing their different provision of services.
One thing I could mention, I didn't mention before, I want to hear Günter what he thinks. It's clear that 5G will improve networks, mobile networks, in two dimensions. There will be really a jump in two dimensions. One will be in the broadband, clearly. It will be a broadband that is, if the provinces are maintained, it will be comparable with the best we have now on fixed lines. So will be an incredible amount of broadband. And also will be a reduction, a very deep reduction of latency. That's what will allow to do things that, for instance, autonomous driving that requires a very minimal latency. So this will, these two dimensions are very important. Both of them are very different. So the question is how somehow this will, other actors will adjust to this ability to exploit different dimension new technology. Do you have anything about this?
Yes, I think that there is this heterogeneity of requirements. The heterogeneity of requirements, because it is an input. No? The quality of transmission of bandwidth capacities, which is based on the frequencies, but on the radio frequencies, but not only on the frequencies, you know, also on other dimensions of complementary inputs, like the size of the cells. If you have a microcell, a microcell, so that means the question is how much are you prepared to invest into the complementary physical infrastructure, in the fiber infrastructure. And it has also to do with the role of complementary investment in the equipment, which one is using. And this mix of investments is an entrepreneurial decision how to mix these combinations of inputs such that the requirements of the ICT requirements of the physical services which you want to provide is fulfilled. The requirements for having let's say a minibus system running in a city, I think you do not need a tactile internet for minibus system to run. That is app-based, you can easily do that. But for this application, it is important that one has a standard that could also be done by let's say 3G already, but 3G networks. You do not need 5G. But of course, 5G is a multi-purpose technology. I have also written in the paper, it is a multi-purpose technology. If you build it, you will use it for several heterogeneous applications. So you have this path dependency, 3G, 4G, 5G. 5G is becoming very much important when you have high throughput, when you have low latency requirements, and when you need also the convergence of fixed and mobile. The fixed and mobile technologies. That is this 5G triangle, also what ITU was introducing. And that means if you are in the city and you need in the city this, you would organize a platform for networked vehicles, then you really need all this highest quality dimensions of 5G. And also you need also the requirements of the complementary investments.